unshakable belief that every person carried a story hidden beneath their daily mask. And Maria, she intrigued him. Not because she asked for attention, she didn't. Not because she was extraordinary in any obvious way, she wasn't. But because she carried a sadness in her eyes that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. Adrian had always trusted numbers, data, and strategies, but with Maria, something tugged at him, an instinct he couldn't shake. It began on a day when he noticed her leaving the office looking unusually distraught. Instead of heading toward the bus stop like she usually did, she walked in the opposite direction, her steps hurried but shaky. Adrian hesitated. Following an employee wasn't something he ever imagined doing. It felt intrusive, inappropriate, maybe even wrong, but something about the way she clutched the strap of her bag and wiped her cheek told him she needed help, even if she didn't know it. So from a distance, he followed. She walked through narrow alleys, past dim-lit streets, toward the older part of town where buildings leaned tiredly against one another. Eventually, she entered a small, run-down apartment complex. Adrian remained outside and watched as she knocked on a door, then immediately knelt beside an elderly woman lying on a thin mattress inside the doorway. Maria pulled medicine from her bag, held the woman's trembling hand, and whispered words soft enough for comfort but strong enough to keep the woman's hope alive. Adrian's breath caught. He stayed only a minute before retreating silently, ashamed of himself for following her but unable to erase the image from his mind. The next day, he noticed small things he had overlooked for far too long. How Maria sometimes skipped lunch, how she never joined coworkers during breaks, how she wore the same pair of shoes long after they had worn thin. He had thought she was simply frugal, private, but now he wondered how much she silently sacrificed each day. And so he followed again, not to pry, he told himself, but to understand. Over the next week, he watched her routine unfold. After work she cleaned another office building, then headed to a late-night diner where she worked the dishwashing shift until nearly midnight. Only after that did she rush home to care for the frail woman he realized must be her mother. Maria didn't rest. She didn't complain. She just kept going, driven by a strength that broke Adrian's heart more each day. But the breaking point came one rainy night when Maria collapsed outside the diner, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Adrian, who had been nearby again, ran to her side. She tried to stand, insisting she was fine, but her legs trembled uncontrollably. In that moment, seeing her soaked, shaking, and still trying to smile, Adrian felt something unfamiliar rising inside him, an ache that wasn't pity but a deep respect tinged with guilt. He helped her up, gently, carefully, and when she finally allowed herself to lean on him, he knew his life, and hers, was about to change in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Maria didn't want to sit in Adrian's car that night, but the rain had turned into a violent storm, and her trembling body left her with little choice. She apologized over and over as he drove her home, insisting she didn't mean to cause trouble, promising she would make up her missed hours, begging him not to think she was irresponsible. Adrian's heart cracked a little more with every word. When they reached her building, he insisted on walking her upstairs, and though she hesitated, her fatigue left her unable to argue. Inside the tiny apartment, the air smelled faintly of sanitizing wipes and warm soup. On the mattress in the corner lay her mother, pale but smiling weakly as Maria rushed to her side. Adrian stood silently as Maria checked her mother's medication, covered her with a blanket, and held her hand with a tenderness that made his chest tighten. When Maria finally looked back at him, her eyes filled with apology rather than fear. "Please don't fire me," she whispered, voice cracking. Adrian, stunned, took a step forward. "Maria, why would you think I'd fire you?" She lowered her gaze. "Because you shouldn't have to deal with all this. I should be stronger, I shouldn't miss work, and I shouldn't need help. I'm sorry you had to find out like this." Adrian's throat tightened. This wasn't weakness. This was strength, raw, unfiltered, relentless strength. The kind he had never seen in any boardroom or negotiation table. He urged her to sit. After a moment of resistance, she did, her shoulders slumping as if finally releasing a weight she had carried alone for too long. He asked gently about her life, and once she realized he wasn't judging her, the truth poured out like a dam finally breaking. Maria had been her mother's sole caregiver since her father passed away 6 years ago. Her mother's condition had worsened after a stroke, leaving her needing around-the-clock assistance. Maria had quit college, taken multiple jobs, and trimmed her life down to survival mode. Every paycheck went straight to rent, medicine, and bills. She had never taken a weekend off, never taken a vacation, and never, not once, complained to anyone. I didn't want to seem ungrateful, she whispered. Your company gave me my first real job. I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle it. Adrian felt a heavy mix of shame and admiration. How many times had he seen her tired and simply assumed it was normal stress? How many times had he passed her in the hallway without seeing what was really happening behind her polite smile? She wasn't invisible, he had just never looked closely enough. And the part that gnawed at him most was how relieved she seemed simply because someone finally noticed her pain. Before he left, her mother stirred and called softly, Maria. Is that your boss? Adrian knelt beside her softly. Yes, ma'am, my name is Adrian. Her mother smiled, fragile but warm. Thank you for taking care of my daughter. Adrian felt his chest tighten, not because he deserved the gratitude, but because he suddenly wished he had been paying attention sooner. Maria walked him outside, apologizing again for the chaos of her life. Adrian stopped her gently. Maria, please stop saying sorry. She blinked back, tears, unused to kindness directed toward her. He continued, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. And I should have seen this sooner. She shook her head, embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to see it. But that night, the truth, her truth, had been revealed, and something changed. Adrian drove home in silence, the memory of her exhausted eyes haunting him. He felt a responsibility now, one deeper than the title of employer. He wanted to help her, truly help her, not out of pity but out of respect for her courage. And so the next morning, Adrian made a decision that would alter both of their lives forever.